fire up the live stream here. I just need 5 seconds.
Thank you guys for joining us.
Keep your stand-up routine going.
Okay, you guys are good.
Awesome. Well, welcome, guys. I'm actually going to step out of the way. I'm going to let Liz stand here because
You can hear me.
you can hear. Yes. So, thank you guys for so much for being here today. So, if you guys did not know, me and Liz have not done a biblical health show. We actually we're part of a network called totwtv. Anybody hear about it? Okay, great. We did that show for 2 years on totwtv, and because we're like kind of like novice and hack jobs and whatever, it was a lot of fun. And
We did a lot of rambling.
yeah, so the last time we spoke together on health has been 1 year, basically, at Take on the World 18. So,
Who was here for our presentation in 18? Awesome. Because we got a little bit of review.
yeah, it's the
But it'll be
same.
new. It'll be new for everybody.
So it's the
that's
same
awesome.
exact presentation in a new layout. Just kidding, just kidding. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started.
So we titled this the K.I.S.S method for health. And I think when anybody sees that acronym, what do you think of? Well, we changed it up just a little bit. But so the tagline here, the biblical way to reclaim your health. Now, has anybody seen Dr. Alfonso Manzo yet? So he dives deep into amazing things. He's an incredible individual. We're going to keep it simple here. And we're going to give you simple aspects to reclaim your health, to get you started on that journey, but in a simple way. There's so many amazing topics here that go deep, that go heavy. Your brain's probably ready to explode, I'm sure. So we're keeping it simple. And by that, what we mean, we're going to keep it simply spiritual. So that's how we changed the K.I.S.S acronym.
Yeah, so the verse that came to mind was 3 John 3:2, which is, "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prosper." So this was extremely, there's Dr. Manzo in the back. See, he has to have a whiteboard. We are going to keep it very simple today. So, and when you have issues, see, we believe, when we have to see someone like Dr. Manzo, it's because we didn't keep it simple. So if we can keep these principles every day very simple, and then have a simple approach to health, that we are working on it daily simply, we won't need to always have to go to pharmacia, right? So many people are hooked on pharmacia, or even going to have to see, any type of naturopath as well, because we can regain our health if we look at the scriptures, if we look at these things spiritually, what we should be consuming, what we should be walking in daily. So
Yeah.
that is the premise to our talk today. So as we
Yeah, and we truly feel with all the knowledge out there, everything out on Google, the enemy has used that to confuse people. Follow this fad, follow that, do this, take this pill. It's extremely confusing to truly understand health and how to regain health, take your health to the next level, who to follow, who do you listen. And truly, when you look at scripture, it is so simple. And everything that's being promoted today, even these fads, when you truly look at where it came from, there are aspects that were in the Bible from day one. But, the enemy has taken it and confused it and made everything so complicated that people just give up and they don't know where to go because it's just overwhelming. So that's the premise of why we want to keep it simply spiritual. So we all know this. Today, we are digging our graves with our forks. Our lifestyle, the stress, the fast-paced lifestyle that leads to all the processed fast foods, all of that is driving disease. Heart disease, our #1 killer, is a lifestyle-driven disease. 40% of adults in the U.S. are currently overweight or obese, and obesity is now the second leading cause of cancer. So last year, I touched on a brief story of a good friend of ours who we did a few shows on IUCTV with, Dr. Patrick Vickers, who has a Gerson clinic in Mexico. And you know, I think many of you know these stats. 1 out of 3 individuals in their lifetime will hear you have cancer. And I talk with him frequently. We get a lot of people messaging us asking, you know, well, this family member has cancer. What can I do? What advice can I give? And a lot of times I'll, you know, pass that along to Dr. Vickers. And most often the person is too far gone to even try to rejuvenate the body and have that cellular energy back to overcome cancer. But he'll tell me, he'll just say, Liz, you know, 20 years ago, it was easier. Somebody could come to me and be at like stage 2, stage 3, even if they did a few chemo treatments. And you know, we poured everything of the Gerson therapy, and he's advanced it even. We've done everything, and that has either prolonged them by a number of years or it's reversed the cancer. But today, because of our environment, our food, the chemtrails, the GMOs, all of that, it's extremely difficult to get the body to reverse, extremely. So we are only going to see that number increase eventually to 50%. We'll hear that you have cancer in your lifetime. So don't wait. Don't wait till you have a health ailment. The time is now, today. Start making changes today. Simple changes today.
You know, and this one is, you know, kind of a recap from last year, right? So I think it's Tiffany, Josiah, and Mike. So we're now look at this. I'm putting links in this. Our water guy. I'm putting this in. I called him. I'm sorry. He's my good friend, so I can do that. So this is our beginning of the original design from the beginning. I'm sure everybody's seen and heard this verse, which is, and God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in the which is of the fruit of the tree yielding seed to you, it shall be for me." King James. Genesis 1:29. So this is our standard. This is where we start. This is the original design. We know that plants were his intention, right? We know that there was no killing, there was no murder, there was no nothing, right? There was no need. These things were life-sustaining. This is that original perfect design. You know, mom knew it best, right? When mom always said growing up, eat your vegetables, right? Every mom knows that. So like if you make a plate of food and you have chicken, and you have this on it, and what's left? The broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, the spinach, and what's mom saying? Eat your vegetables, right? If you left the chicken but you ate everything else, you'd go, oh, you can go ahead and play, right? Ingrained, we're already ingrained with that mentality, right?
And we truly feel that's innate. We know that truth. It's ingrained in us. The Garden of Eden, the most perfect place with the perfect people. You know, the perfect food, the perfect diet was plants. You look at plants and they are life-giving. You go to raw foods, which maybe I'm skipping a little ahead, but raw foods have everything in them, all the correct amino acids to sustain life. Everything feeds at a cellular level.
Right, and the one thing that you'll hear oftentimes is things like, well, plants don't have protein, which is a myth. Plants don't have the proper nutrients, so you're going to need to do this, and that. All of these things wouldn't be true, you know, because here we have right from the beginning, this is this original design. And so I could, you know, if you have questions on that stuff, we can answer those things at the end as well. But we love this one. Daniel's health plan had its roots from the original design in the garden. We spent a lot of time on this last year. So who here has heard of the story of Daniel 1? It should be like everybody, right? If you read your Bible, Daniel 1, it starts right there. So if you read the book of Daniel, it starts off with this aspect of basically a test, right? We see, please test your servants for 10 days and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Well, in this story, we know that they were consuming the king's meat, the wine, all of these things that the others were men, and they knew at the end of this, the result was, well, that their men were strong. The men who ate vegetables and drank water only, they were stronger, they had better appearance, they looked better, right? Now, we know that there is a much bigger layer to that, right? Because we have some aspects of probably biblically unclean meat. We have the introductions of more alcohol in the diet, right? So we know that, you know, if any of us go on a juice fast, you know, we can watch these documentaries today and see, you know, all of these things on Netflix about juicing, right? Fat, sick, nearly dead. Do those people look worse off at the end of the film, or do they like better off, right? So we know this is this mentality of just going to vegetables, drinking water, right? And that's the premise of juicing, right? Well, I mean, what do we get from juice? We get the water, we get the sugar directly right from those fruits and vegetables, and it starts to rebuild and sustain life. So I believe this is a test and has its roots right back into the garden.
And our own personal story, I mean, we've been passionate about health for a number of years, but the pieces really didn't start to come together until we were planning health conferences many years back, and we would bring in Dr. Vickers, who I just mentioned, the cancer doctor, and you know, I would listen to his presentation, and it just started to click with me when he would talk about anybody who would come to him. You know, they follow the Gerson plan, which is completely plant-based. It is 25 pounds of fruits and vegetables juiced every day for each person. 25 pounds. They are drinking nothing but juice, eating almost predominantly raw up until like dinner time, and then we'll have cooked potatoes. So it's completely plants. And they have to do that for a solid 2 weeks when they're at the clinic. And then afterwards, they have to do it for a solid 2 years. They have to stay that way. And any of his patients, he said, who were, you know, more aggressive cancers, stage 3 and beyond, if they would go home and in that 2-year time span have meat, their chance of survival was cut by a lot. Now, in the clinic, when people come and stay there for 2 weeks, if they are detoxifying too hard and their body can't handle it, you know, they're having all the juice, they're also having about 5 coffee enemas every day, along with many other advanced therapies, and if it's too difficult, their body can't handle the detoxification, they give them a piece of meat, and it halts it. So, when I heard that, I'm just like, wow. And then you look at, you know, Genesis 1:29, our original diet, the perfect diet, and I would just sit back and listen and be like, why am I going to wait to, you know, even get close to that point? Why don't we just start eating the original design today? And that was over 4 years ago.
And so even before that, you know, we had more of a moderate diet. So we would have, you know, we started cutting, we had a little bit of meat in the diet, and then our diet became much more plant-based driven, and then we decided, let's give this a try. See how it's gone. 4 years in, I will tell you, the first thing that I noticed was the hypoglycemia. I had severe hypoglycemia, so I always had to eat. Always was hungry. Sugar crashes all the time, and you know, I have to talk to her about doing this. It always throws me off too. Always. But this is how it is. And I forgot where I was. And so hyperglycemia. So once I started consuming only plants in the diet, that reverted. So, but the next slide, you know, is what we have, what we see, and what we know. The fallen world provision. So a lot of people come and see, you know, if everybody's heard the V word. I know you may have, there's a lot of probably things on it, right? Vegan, right? Oh, vegan. And what do most people do when they hear the word vegan? It comes with a big stigma, right? It comes with a really bad thing. Exactly, right? And this is what we did not want to be because we never, in all honesty, we never knew a healthy vegan our whole lives. So being in the health industry, we had saw all sorts of fads, all sorts of things, and early on, every vegan we saw was always angry. They were
sickly.
Yes, we would see this constant
They never
thing.
really exemplified health.
Right, and so we would look at scripture and we would say, what is going on? So we never ever considered that when we first got into health because of all those things. But if you guys are here today and you don't know about the fallen world provisions, right? Who here knows about clean and unclean? Do I need to go over this? But we know here. So if you guys aren't familiar and you don't know, Genesis 7:2, 9:3 begins this clean and the unclean, right? So we know in Genesis 7:2 how many. For those watching, maybe there's a lot of people who don't know watching. How many animals or kinds did Noah take on the ark? I'm in a crowd that should know this. Right?
2 of everything and 7.
7 of everything.
Right, so we all know that. We're going to preach that, teach that. This is where it starts and it begins, right? His ways were always there. They're always in the beginning. They never go away. Because we'll talk about specifically why we know these things are unclean, right? So Genesis 7:2 starts this whole thing off because we now know. Genesis 9:3, right? This is the big detractor to all of Genesis 7:2. You can eat all things, right? Can you eat blowfish? Well, some say, well, you have to cook a particular way. Then you can. Can you eat poison dart frogs? What happens if you eat a poisonous dart frog?
I'm going to die.
Yeah, exactly, right? Toads, salamanders. There are even specific quails that you can't eat, right? So we see the story of the quails in Scripture being consumed, but did you know there's specific quail that you can't even consume? And they have a different classification. They're a little bit genetically different, but by design. They're poisonous to us, right? So most people will go to bat for this guy right here. Oh, we can eat this guy. He's nice and good. Who's going to bat for these guys over here? Come on, you guys are crazy. We can eat dogs. Certain countries would say that, right? Here in America, we'd go, if we had a restaurant that was serving dogs and cats, right? We would all think that way. So we know that these foods right here, these animals, because this would not be considered food. This would be considered the provisional food in Scripture, right? We have lots of things to back that up. Not only the laws of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, which have been proven and tested through Dr. David Ma, who has proven within a study. You can go Google this, look this up, and you can just download the study, which shows you he did a toxicology analysis of every single animal that is on this list from both clean and unclean, and he had proven that every single unclean animal was full of toxins. Toxins cause exactly what we talked about on those other sites, cancer. While these were virtually toxic-free. They weren't completely toxic-free, but they were virtually toxic-free, which the minimal damage to the body was much, much less from a toxin standpoint. So we know there's something there, right? And then obviously we have the prophetic passages of Isaiah and Revelations in regards of the unclean animals, in regards of the swine, the mice, and the birds. They're still unclean, even in a future standpoint from where we're at right now in time. So this is the provisions. There's a lot of people that talk about, you can stand right over there, sorry, stole the screen. There's a lot of people who talk about plant-based eating, and they will reject the idea of the provisions. We don't believe that. We've come fully to understanding what we call, and we're going to go over that a little bit, which is, what is a good diet? What is a better diet? What is the best diet? And that is our approach today, keeping it simply spiritual.
So, understanding the challenges with these provisions. So although some believe this passage in Leviticus 17, it shall be a perpetual statute for your generations through all your dwellings that you eat neither fat nor blood. So although some believe this passage refers only to offerings, science today supports, of course, reducing or eliminating animal fat, as it's known to increase insulin resistance, diabetes, inflammation. All of those are at really the root of heart disease, our #1 killer. But also autoimmune diseases, cellular oxidation. Those two are the contributors to all of cancer rates rising. And we have a short video, that explains further, talking about how, well, I'll just play it. so you can hear it. It's a great video. Nutritionfacts.org with Dr. Bleeger on the lipotoxicity, so fat. Should I just press this again?
The association between fat and insulin resistance is now widely accepted, so-called ectopic fat accumulation. The accumulation of fat in places it's not supposed to be, like within our muscle cells. But all fats don't affect muscles the same. The type of fat, saturated versus unsaturated, is critical. Saturated fats like palmitate, found mostly in meat, dairy, eggs, cause insulin resistance, but oligate, found mostly in nuts, olives, avocados, may actually improve insulin sensitivity. What makes saturated fat bad? Saturated fat causes more of those toxic breakdown products and mitochondrial dysfunction, increased oxidative stress, free radicals, inflammation, causing a vicious cycle of events in which saturated fat-induced free radical causes dysfunction, little power plants within our muscle cells, which cause an increase in free radical production and impairment of insulin signaling. Fat cells filled with saturated fat activate an inflammatory response to a far greater extent. This increased inflammation, along with eating more saturated fat, has been demonstrated to cause insulin resistance through free radical and ceramide production. Saturated fat has also been shown to have a direct effect on skeletal muscle insulin resistance. Accumulation of saturated fat increases the amount of diacylglycerol in our muscles, which has been demonstrated to have a potent effect on muscle insulin resistance. And it doesn't matter if the muscle in our blood, and the fat in our blood comes from our own fat or from their fat. You can take muscle biopsies from people and correlate the saturated fat buildup in their muscles with insulin resistance. While monounsaturated fats are more likely to be detoxified or safely stored away, saturated fats create these toxic breakdown products like ceramide that cause lipotoxicity. Lipo meaning fat, is in liposuction, and toxicity. This fat toxicity in our muscles is a well-known concept in the explanation of the trigger for insulin resistance. I've talked about the role of saturated and trans fats contributing to the progression of other diseases like autoimmune diseases, cancer, heart disease. They can also cause insulin resistance, the underlying cause of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. In the human diet, saturated fats are derived from animal sources, while trans fats originate in meat and milk condition of partially hydrogenated and refined vegetable oils. That's why experimentally shifting people from animal fats to plant fats can improve insulin sensitivity. Insulin sensitivity was impaired on the diet with added butterfat, but not on the diet with added olive fat. We know prolonged exposure of our muscles to high levels of fat leads to severe insulin resistance, with saturated fats demonstrated to be the worst. But they don't just lead to inhibition of insulin signaling, the activation of inflammatory pathways, and the increase in free radicals. They cause an alteration in gene expression, leading to a suppression of key mitochondrial enzymes like carnitine palmitoyl transferase, which finally solves the mystery of why those eating vegetarian have 60% higher expression of that fat-burning enzyme. They're eating less saturated fat. So, do those eating plant-based diets have less fat clogging their muscles and less insulin resistance too? Well, there hasn't been any data available regarding the insulin sensitivity or inside muscle cell fat of those eating vegan or vegetarian until now. Researchers at the Imperial College of London compared the insulin resistance and muscle fat of vegans versus omnivores. Now, those eating plant-based diets had the unfair advantage of being so much slimmer, so they found omnivores who were as skinny as vegans to see if plant-based diets had a direct effect, as opposed to indirectly pulling fat out of muscles by helping people lose weight in general. They found significantly less fat trapped in the muscle cells of vegans compared to omnivores, even at the same body weight. They found better insulin sensitivity, better blood sugar levels, better insulin levels, and, excitingly, significantly improved beta cell function, the cells in the pancreas that make the insulin in the first place. They conclude that eating plant-based is not only expected to be cardioprotective, helping prevent our #1 killer, heart disease, but that it may be beta cell protective as well, right? Helping also to prevent our seventh leading cause of death, diabetes.
So we see, so who Dr. Michael Greger is, he's a doctor who goes through the medical journals of things that you're not going to hear the medical community ever talk about. If you ever heard anybody talk that way before, have you ever had your doctor tell you any of those things? He said, no, you can go with what we already have. We have our food pyramid chart. Here's where you eat, here's what you do, right? But if they said, here, you need to eliminate this or that, no, they will say those things, on a very rare occasion. If somebody is having a gout issue, well, you have to remove this out of your diet, you have to do this, right? But as a general rule of thumb, this is pretty foreign.
Well, and most doctors today are jumping on the keto bandwagon. And I will tell you, just with what you saw in this video, going keto, that's, having 80% fat. So what you just heard in this video, do you think going 80% fat is a good idea? No. Animal fat, correct, yes. No, it is not a good idea. And even if you have super duper high amounts of plant fat, the plant fat that is more saturated, what that does to the mitochondria, so that was mentioned in this video, the mitochondria is your powerhouse of each cell, it's the power plant for each cell. And you want that to be functioning optimally, because that is what literally recharges the body. So people who saw Dr. Munzo, he speaks, and he's speaking again on the all-of body system, but he uses an analogy of how our body is like a computer and we have a software. I've heard other people use the analogy that our body's a battery. We literally have all this electrical current, running through us. And if we shut off that power, then that's when things start to clog, we start to see disease happen. And you shut off that power by disrupting the mitochondria. And that's what high amounts of saturated fat does. It slows the power of the body. And that is why when you go, again, looking at what a cancer patient should eat, their fat needs to be extremely minimal, truly only what they are getting from the food sources themselves in the most raw form as possible. Raw fat has proper enzymes to be able to break it down. The instant you cook something over 118 degrees, that then oxidizes, causing that cellular oxidation, free radical damage. It's literally damaging the powerhouses of our body.
And so we believe that is a direct ode as we go back. I mean, we can look at the original design or that scripture passage we saw about the fats. We can see that there is probably some spiritual correlations there with that. So as we move forward, here are some other things with challenges with the provisions. So here we're saying, so if anybody walks out here, does Chris and Lisa say you can't ever eat meat again? The answer is? No. Okay, great, thank you. Because, that happens, right? So here's the one interesting thing. And last year we had a nice big graph where it showed human teeth, animal teeth.
And I'm sure many people have seen that, all the different teeth.
Yeah. And so we could say, what do we have the most in common? So humans, just like herbivores, produce an enzyme in their mouth known as amylase. And this enzyme is responsible for breaking down specific things. In this case, it's carbohydrates. That is how our saliva is designed. So I can tell you that all carnivores, specifically, let's take the look of a tiger or a lion, for example. That enzyme is not produced in their saliva whatsoever. We could take a look at every single carnivore. They do not have that enzyme in there. They're not eating carbohydrates. They're not eating leaves. They're not eating these things. They have a very quick digestion of very high acid, which is 100 times stronger than ours, because it is that consuming large amounts of meat. It only meat. That's what they only consume. Other than maybe an occasional, hey, how did this twig get in here? But that is specific to tell us. And here's a tip for you guys. First and foremost. Carbohydrates get a really bad rap, right? That's why everybody's on keto. That's why everybody's on Atkins a long time ago, right? We know that low carbohydrates, exactly, right? So low carbohydrate diets like produce results, right? The immediate results. Everybody's jumping on this bandwagon because we're focused on weight loss. Well, here's the thing about carbohydrates. I mean, besides being the perfect fuel source to our body, well, when we consume them in a cooked or a processed form, they require specific enzymes. And if you guys, I'm going to give you a quick open book test. Where's that enzyme produced? In the saliva, right? So it's in here, right? How many of us actually take the time to chew our food? We're all heard 32 times, right?
Yeah.
This guy does. 32 times we're supposed to chew our food, right? Who does that?
25.
25? Yeah, 30? Yeah.
200.
Yeah. You know, what is it, like 2 or 3 bites, right? That saliva can't break this down. So if we eat a piece of bread, and you know, you go out to a restaurant where that bread keeps coming and everybody's like, oh, we're waiting, you know, like have 5 or 6 rolls in a matter of a few minutes. I've watched them. I've done it. Or a Mexican restaurant. Who's gone to a Mexican restaurant? And sat there,
Those chips and salsa.
and you end up eating way too much chips and salsa, right? Those are carbohydrates. Where's that enzyme that starts the breakdown process of those? In our saliva. We must fully chew that, break that down. So if you're looking to, you know, fully digest our carbs, start with our chewing, start with that breaking down process in our saliva. That's number 1 tip, but that's what we have in common with all the other things. So if you go watch a cow eat, how many times is it chewing? It knows, right?
All day long.
Yeah. And in addition, our stomach's pH and our digestive process mimics that of herbivores as well. I mentioned that. And that helps us to digest, break down, and eliminate. And that's how our system works. It's so similar to those things. So what does that say? That's an ode to this original design with provisions, right? So we do know that these things are occurring. It is believed that ancient Israelites' diet consisted of about 80 to 90% plants, and only about 10 to 20% being clean meats, which were mostly reserved for those special times of feast and offerings. So we know that these things have symbols and they're signs, and they're very prophetic, and they were obviously, we all understand what they're about, right? Who here does not know the feast? Go research them. That's my challenge, right? And so it all comes back to enzymes. So here's our big thing. If you guys watch any biblical health show, we're going to save you guys our enzyme talk. You know, we could do a pudding demonstration. We could do all these fun things. Who has not seen it? Oh wow, the majority of the crowd. So we should have done it, right? But you know, today we if we're going to eat within these provisions, there are things that we can do. There are things known as plant-based enzymes that we can consume with meats, with dairy, with these things that are very hard and acidic on our bodies, which are causing these things. Even if we eat cooked and or processed animal fat, enzymes can help support that breakdown. So there are things. So we believe be responsible. You know, if you're going to consume, you know, animal products, you're going to consume this, you're going to do that. You know, even if we're in this 80-90% range, you know, this 10 to 20%, we want to fully digest, fully utilize. We don't want to even have a case where we're not being able to detoxify properly, as was mentioned.
Right. And if you look at, you go into any CVS, Walgreens, the #1 over-the-counter drug being sold is Nexium, Prilosec. We have a digestive problem today. Nobody can break their food down. Of course, it starts with not chewing it properly, not sitting down in a relaxed environment to eat. We're on the go, eating in front of the TV, eating in the car, always rush. That is horrible for the digestive system. So it starts with chewing food properly, but also having proper gut health. And you can reduce all of that inflammation by eating closer to the vine, eating more plants, eating like an Israelite, having more of an 80 to 90% plants in the diet, and holding to those clean meats, you know, at proper times, or, you know, a few times a month. That way, you are getting in all of the fiber and the carbohydrates that your body thrives on. Your body does not prefer to thrive on fat. It doesn't. Don't buy into that lie. You can lose weight initially, but the long-term effects of it are very, very damaging to the whole entire system and truly to the gut health. Because when you change your food, so if you would say your diet, you eat in moderation. That's typical of what everybody says. But that I would say to that, do you have poison in moderation? No. So get rid of that thought of everything in moderation.
Or would we want to have sickness and disease in moderation? But it's not that bad, right? It's not
Right.
So that's the approach that
So
that we take. Yeah.
if you eat closer to the vine, you're going to be eating more fruits and vegetables, more fiber. If people today ate more fiber in their diet, colon cancer could pretty much be eliminated. Because what happens when you eat all of these plant foods more so than animal foods, the bacteria in your gut changes. Now you may have a few weeks of being really uncomfortable because that change can happen somewhat drastically and it may be unpleasant, but once you get past that hurdle, the bacteria starts to produce all these beneficial components to them that reduce inflammation, that increase digestion, that feed the body properly, versus having more harmful bacteria like you saw in that video with Dr. Grieger. And if you watch more of his videos, you'll see that all of these harmful bacteria produce these byproducts and these toxins, and they increase the IGF-1, which is your factor for increasing cancer growth. We all have cancer cells in us right now. Sitting in your seats, we have hundreds, maybe even thousands of cancer cells in us. It's what we do today, what we have on our fork today, that determines if we allow that cell to continue to mutate and grow, or we allow our immune system to shut it down. It's what we have on our plates today that determines that. Our cancer cells that are in us today could have started when we were 10 years old. It takes cancer a minimum of 10 years for it to even show up on any type of a scan. So we all have it in us today, and we can reverse it and stop it today.
So the next aspect. So we talked
Keeping
about
it simple.
Keeping it simple. So I always say this when we talk about gluttony. Who here has ever tried to consume 3 carrots, like real whole carrots in one sitting?
Like huge ones.
Like a really good sized carrot. Like,
We know you have. Not juice.
Not juice. Eat it.
Eat it.
With the fiber, with everything. Who's ever tried that?
My husband too.
How long before you're full?
Pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly, right? I always say this: it's impossible to be gluttonous on that Genesis 1:29 diet. We're me and Liz, I'm gonna admit, we have an aspect of gluttony in regards to the food in our diet.
Mm-hmm.
Chips, things like that.
Yeah. Chris's sister sitting back there knows we can down chips easily.
Right.
It's a vice.
And so this is an area where are we thankful for grace? This is an area we talk a lot about law. We talk a lot about these things. This is an area as we grow in our walk. Grace is super important. So if you guys go out of here and you say, "Man, Chris was talking about grace," and I go, "Wow." I believe I believe this area because we've all overeaten. I heard a story. I don't know if he's in here yesterday, but he was talking about overeating popcorn. There he is. There he is. And it was great. And I was like, I'm going to use that. And he said he hadn't thrown up since he's come to these dietary instructions in like 9 or 10 years, until he overate like this huge bag of popcorn. Right? You go, yeah, shouldn't have done that, right? And so we look at these things as we grow. So look, we aren't judging anybody. We're not coming out and saying, here are these things. But an interesting passage, obviously, in Proverbs says,
A hard-hitting passage.
yeah, and it says, "And put a knife to thy throat, if thou be a man given to appetite." Now we know that spiritually means so much deeper, because we're going to talk a little bit about not only what we put into our mouth. These things have a spiritual layer to them about eyes, ears, everything that we put in, because we can be very gluttonous with those things as well, right? So,
Yeah. We're going to move to talk
We're
faster
gonna-
because we don't want you guys to miss lunch.
yes.
But speaking of
When's the win?
12:30.
12:30.
12:30. Oh,
Yeah.
good, good, because I thought it was 12. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Seriously, sir.
when we eat foods that we enjoy, the body releases dopamine, which that dopamine is associated with feelings of pleasure and reward. You know, when you have a love for chocolate or ice cream or any of that, and it gives us that rewarding feeling, which then encourages us to continue to eat more.
And let me ask you this: anybody addicted to chocolate in here? Anybody love chocolate?
Ice cream.
Well, I'll give you a thing. Most likely, you have mineral deficiencies. There are mineral deficiencies, so you are craving specific things in there. The chromiums, all sorts of aspects of magnesium. There's a lot of things to that that we will be craving. Yeah, or that you're missing in your diet. The minute you replace those with whole foods, those cravings go away, and then you're like, I can enjoy it every once in a while and not have to crave it. So we know lots of people.
But the food industry is going to capitalize on the craving. They know this. You can see it in the marketing. You can see it in the ploys that they put out to everything. They, put those specific hidden ingredients in there to make you want it more. Keep coming back for more.
And hey, we're at a conference where we can talk about taking on this world, right? Who's ever gotten in a car and go, I just started a diet, I'm going to eat healthy, and then you got to go pick up something. Where can you go?
Yeah.
Right? Fast. You need to pick it up fast. You need to do this, right? I mean, what's our options?
Very good.
Very, very little, right? It's by design. It's by design. Going to inner cities where there's a big agenda, I believe. Where we see obviously a lot more abortion clinics, where we see a lot of things to destroy. Yeah, destroy. And it is nothing full of the worst foods. Liquor stores on every corner, right? It is heartbreaking. Yeah.
I should have put this in there. I love the quote from Anne Wigmore. If anybody's familiar, she's pretty much the juicing queen, the greens juicing queen. And I hope I don't botch it, but her quote is, "Food can either be the greatest form of medicine or the slowest form of poison." And that's what's happening today. We look at all the fast food. Yeah, it's food. It's food-like products, but it's truly poison in disguise. That's what it is.
And then in this group we may say, well, it's biblically clean. Biblically clean still kills because we're not watching, and we're going to talk a little bit about more of that.
So all of this leads, as we know, emotional eating, stress eating, addictions, soul ties to food, all back to what these types of foods do to the brain and what they release. Now, keeping in line with our keeping it simply spiritual and keeping it simple. And I find this fascinating. Who's into intermittent fasting? That's the buzz right now. It's sort of like keto's still there, but it's the fasting that's really, really popular right now. And you go back into scripture and you can see that that's sort of been woven, since the very beginning. And you looking at intermittent fasting, there's a lot of great qualities to it, but I think it's really mislabeled because you're asleep during certain hours and you're only eating during specific times, but that specific time should be daytime, and we know it's our digestive system is the strongest during the daytime. It shouldn't be this intermittent fasting as like a buzzword. It's just how everything was designed from day one, truly. After the sun goes down, we know that insulin levels raise, blood sugars as well as cholesterol and triglycerides. So eating after the sun goes down, because our digestive system is weakened, our body takes much longer and much harder to be able to digest. So of course, having less food in the evening allows for cortisol levels to drop, melatonin production to be increased, which then gives way to having a more restful, nourishing, restorative sleep. I think all of us sort of know this. It's one of those things that's innate in us, you know. Breakfast, it breaks the fast of sleeping. So this has always been there. You know, I think we need to look at it as, you know, these are just simple principles. You don't have to follow all these fads that are constantly happening. And I'm looking forward to that. All right, so when to eat, now how to eat. And touched on this a little bit with gut health, but it is so extremely important to have a rest and digest. And again, we go back to Proverbs. A joyful heart is good medicine. And this can go, we could spend pretty much a whole presentation just on this, the emotional aspect and emotions that we can hold within us that affect our digestive system. But being joyful, being restful when we eat, what it does to the body, your parasympathetic nervous system is activated when you're relaxed. And in this state, your body has the best digestion, the best absorption of nutrients, and the best elimination of toxins. You know, this is where you're together at the dinner table with your family, not, you know, hitting the hot topic buttons, but just enjoying each other's company, not eating fast, having, you know, a set dinner time, and just fellowshipping. You know, you look at when we get together for these feast times and we're sitting around the campfire and we're just relaxing and enjoying company. It is so good for us on so many levels, and it's so good for your digestion. Who knew? You know, again, keeping it simply spiritual. If you're multitasking, stressed, engaged in arguments at the dinner table, your sympathetic nervous system is ignited, and that's the fight, flight, or fright. How well do you think your digestion is going to be then? Poor. Because when that's activated, your blood is shunted away from the digestive tract, sent to your muscles so that you're ready to take action, flee the situation.
And so, you know, this comes back to one of the biggest things within Scripture, which is trust and have faith in Him, right? Be anxious for nothing, right? And oftentimes, when we're not, you know, taking the time to eat, not taking the time to properly do these things, it's because it's these stresses in lives. We got to take our kids over to here. Got to do this. Got to do this. Got to do that, and we become anxious, or, you know, we're dealing with heavy spiritual warfare, and you're anxious, right? And if I was to eat in this state without giving it over, right? So there's an aspect of...
I can tell you're going to have heartburn.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And also, you know, if you're also stressed and, you know, having gadgets and devices around you, eating in front of the TV, that's where you have that sort of like mindless eating, which is continually eating and eating and eating. If that's a problem for you, obviously, eliminate all of that. But be mindful when you eat to set your fork down after each bite. Set it down so you're chewing that 32 times for each bite and enjoying that food. Allow your enzymes in your saliva to really be activated. And guess what? You're going to eat less because you're taking that time to allow your body and your stomach to fill and get to that point where it tells you, I'm good, I'm done. You know, it's those simple principles of having a smaller plate, putting less on your plate, setting down your fork between each bite, and just enjoying it in a relaxed environment. You will get more full fast, you will stay fuller longer, your digestion will be better, your energy will increase, all because you're breaking down food.
And what we want to say is we are so sorry that at Take on the World 19
Yeah, you don't get that.
and 18, we did not give you any of that opportunity.
We gave you a little bit more this
Yeah.
year than 18.
Yes. So we're working on that. And
Yeah.
then I'm stressed for you guys to come back to get to the
Yeah.
stage, to be there for the speakers. So I'm rushing
His
you guys.
digestion's been a long
Yeah. I've eaten I eat 5 minutes here at the conference.
Yeah.
Which is not good.
Have you guys noticed about music during meetings? I don't like loud music during.
Heavy metal music mostly is what you want to listen to when you eat. Does it put your body into a chaotic state? Anything obviously calming, you know, even diffusing essential oils, those things while we relax and while we eat. I mean, all these things are
I'm saying this because some family members may like to listen to loud music while you're eating, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
I don't.
If there's a frequency to everything.
Yeah.
And there's a frequency to being calm. There's a frequency to a lot of those things.
So for someone who loves to listen to loud music, or music loud,
digestion is going to be poor. They're most definitely.
it must be an exception to.
Yeah, ask them how their digestion is.
Maybe not now, maybe in 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so how emotions play into digestion. Obviously, your mood affects your gut bacteria and vice versa. We know this because of the gut-brain connection. They impact one another. And the primary messenger from the gut to the brain. So the messages isn't what we would think. We would think the brain impacts the gut more, but it's truly the other way around. The gut impacts the brain due to serotonin. 95% of serotonin, the happy, feel-good hormones, 95% of it is made in the gut. Serotonin regulates our mood, our appetite, our sleep, our memory, learning. Deficiencies in serotonin obviously cause the mood disorders, OCD tendencies, weight fluctuations, poor sleep, poor memory, and learning challenges.
So right there, how many people immediately when they started to eat biblically clean improved in those areas of better mood, sleep, appetite? Right?
There's a spiritual aspect to
There,
all of it.
right? And so we know that when we remove the toxins from the foods we eat. So if somebody who's in here was a bacon lover and was consuming massive amounts of bacon all the time, right? Not only are we dealing with toxins, parasites, and all the other things that potentially come with that, the minute that we eliminate those things from the diet, as our bodies start to repair, our digestion gets better. Now let's take it. So now we've improved. So remember what I said in the beginning. We said, here's what a good diet is. Here's what a better diet is. Here's what a best diet is. So as we elevate and walk up this health journey together as we walk, by the time we get to a best diet, when we're flowing in these foods, going back to the garden, going back to these things as much as we can, eating these live, living, whole foods that He has created for these. These are things. So when people talk about anxiety, we know that's spiritual and warfare, but we know that also it's physical. And there's an aspect to that. So as we improve our diets, we improve anxiety, our moods. And when we're off mood-wise, we know, we're not taking time to eat right in regard to when to eat, how to eat, right? We're blowing them, we're running, we're racing, and it's all thrown off.
And then we're eating crap because we're on the go.
Yeah, and we're eating
And
more
we're stressed.
processed food.
We're stressed.
And so we
then
may,
we're craving those awful foods.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But,
we speak to ourselves just as much as we
Absolutely.
we're.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we're encouraging and not condemning. So yes.
But a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots bones. Another great Proverbs. So keep your temple pure. Another very simple aspect, as we know. But there's a lot of addictions today, and it's not the typical addictions that we would think of. Addictions can be as simple as a sugar addiction. I know for a lot of people, when they try to transition to more plants, they have a very strong addiction to cheese. Anytime you ask somebody when they're trying to be plant-based, they're like, but cheese, I can't. And the thing about dairy, it has a morphine-like effect. It has casomorphines in it. It literally gives the very similar response when you become addicted to it.
And not only that, our bodies. So we're not saying you can never. So again, let's go over this one more time. Did Chris and Liz say you can't eat meat or dairy? Okay.
We're just telling you there's some properties in it.
Right. So, however, when we look at dairy, for example, from an enzyme standpoint, our pancreas produces all the enzymes, and they're very specific. So you have an enzyme called protease or peptidase, which is stage 1, stage 2. I get very technical on enzymes, and they digest protein. Okay, so no matter what type of protein they are, they digest that. Or we have specific enzymes like lipase, which digest fat. They also have specific enzymes that digest Carbohydrates, we mentioned it, which is amylase, which is in our saliva, and we produce very little amounts of amylase in our pancreas. Our pancreas, if you did not know, is which is right around here, which produces the majority of our enzymes in our body. And those are what digest and utilize our food. Food cannot be digested without proper enzymatic activity within the body. So when you look at and study this, there's an enzyme called lipase. I'm sorry. It's called, why did I say it? It is called, because I'm talking about dairy, it is called, why did it just leave my brain?
Lactase.
Lactase, wow. Wow. How did I mean, I've talked about this 1,000 times. There's an enzyme called lactase. Guess what it digests?
Lactate.
Lactose. There it is. Wow, I don't know how I missed that. So lactase digests lactose. Guess how much lactase we have in our pancreas?
Not much.
Very, very little. So it means, hey, if you consume some lactose, well, you have some of these things. Why do you think everybody is lactose intolerant?
And you may not even know you're lactose intolerant if you have dairy and afterwards you're clearing your throat a ton, you feel a little extra phlegm, maybe you feel a little congested.
Or arthritis, any of those things could be triggered by.
It's an inflammatory response that your body can't digest it, can't break it down, doesn't like it, and those are the signals that it's sending to you. And you just clear your
So
throat.
did Chris and Liz say not to eat dairy? No, but small amounts. Our bodies tell us that. It's how we're made, it's how we're designed. So
Raw is better, of course, because then the enzymes are present.
Yes.
So you are able to break it down.
Yeah, so
better.
there's actually a lot of people.
But
Jordan Rubin, he created a book called, I don't know if anybody heard. Yeah.
Miracles. Yes.
The Maker's Diet is the name of the book. And he talks about healing himself on raw milk, right? This raw milk contains what? All of those specific enzymes. Did it again. Lactase enzymes. Wow. And those enzymes digest that and it helps utilize it. So,
But just because it's raw doesn't mean the casomorphines and the other properties aren't present, as well as a lot of hormone growth factors. They're still there.
Yeah.
They're absolutely still there.
Yeah.
So the hormones that are in dairy, in cows, the hormones are made to take a baby cow and grow it into a 500-pound cow. That's always going to be present, whether it's raw or pasteurized. So keep that in mind.
small amounts.
Keep that in mind.
So as we go in, keep that in mind. 70-80% plants, the other aspects.
Yeah, so if you are leaning more that way, addictions will have less of a hold. I'll be honest, they do, especially with sugar. If you eliminate sugar, we know sugar is just as addictive as drugs, heroin. Okay, we know that. As you eliminate it, your cravings will completely disappear. I guarantee it. It's happened. It's happened to us many, many times over. And we look back to Scripture. Dearly beloved, I beseech you, as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from lustful flesh, which war against the soul. Wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread, and you labor for that which satisfieth not? Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good. Let's keep our temples pure. Let's eliminate these addictions that should have no place in destroying our temples. And our favorite,
So this is
our last slide.
Yeah. So this is our final slide. So it may take like a while. So hopefully I can finish in just a few minutes. Who here saw our episode where it was entitled
The Great Pork Debate. Go watch it. It's on IUCTV. We put a lot of time into that.
Yeah, that was great. We put a lot of time into that one. So keep it simply spiritual. We believe that the law is holy and good, right? I got like one.
Amen. Yeah.
Amen. You good. We went to a Baptist school, so we were used to that. Even though the church that we went to, we never heard it, so you guys could say amen to it. And we would have been okay. This is the really tough and heavy part. I will say this. So when we come into understanding his instructions, right? We talked about Leviticus, we talked about Deuteronomy early, and I even gave a brief scientific thing, which we can, if you want to ask some questions, we can talk about that. Following the letter of the law. It's actually extremely easy if we just took a sheet and we just wrote.
At our checklist.
Yeah, and kept our checklist. Oh, no pork, no shellfish, no shrimp, no mice, no snakes, no. We're good, right? We walk that way. But what do we see all throughout the New Testament, right? When Yeshua comes back, he's teaching us a very simple message, right? He's teaching us the true nature of these laws, right? When he says to lust after a woman in your mind is the same as committing the act of adultery, right? Because this thing is spiritual. Paul makes that very case, right? This law is spiritual. So there's a spiritual lesson within all the laws, and they're teaching us something. And, when we come into this, we can get very legalistic, and we can start saying, hey, here's our list. I'm extremely good, right? Oh, that just list that got a little deeper, because now we know, gelatin is in every other thing, right? Oh, it's in marshmallows, it's in Skittles, it's in this, it's in that. And we start going with this list, right? It continues with the list. Okay, so when, in the Great Pork Debate, we went through, let's say, all these specific candies and all these different things that we're going to go, oh, can't touch it, it's all clean.
We get our highlighter out. Oh, there's gelatin.
Yeah.
And we look at this mile-long ingredient list. Oh, I see gelatin. I'm going to put it back.
Right, and so that's where our minds go. When we bypass the rest of the ingredients in there, and go, whoa, this is actually 10 times more harmful than actually a little bit of this, spiritually unclean. But this thing is actually causing this cancer, that cancer. And we bypass that because we really don't care. We're following a list of checklists, right? When we should be following the spiritual nature of these laws. In our video, what we always are so passionate to teach. When we look at our dinner plate, our lunch plate, our breakfast plate, and we walk in those things, if we walk by the letter, we will check off the checklist. But if we're walking by the Spirit, we're going to look at our food on our plate. We're going to say, does this lead me to blessings or does this lead me to curses? We'll have our answer. It's so simple.
Does that plate lead me to health or lead me to disease down the road?
And I think we have our answer right there. He's trying to teach us. He loves us so much. He told us what foods not to consume because we didn't have science. We didn't have websites. We didn't have nutritionfacts.org telling us all about animal fat, right? We didn't have that. No, we just needed to trust and believe what he said. And they needed to do that. And did they fall away? Yes, right? Now we have everything at our disposal. We have science, we have peer-reviewed research, we have this, we have that. Are we still just going to come back and trust him and believe him? So many people can't, right? And that's what gets so tough, so difficult as we move forward, right? We want to say, well, no, this theology means we can do this and that, right? And it's heartbreaking because the Father just told us, here's what is a blessing. He loves us so much.
And it's so simple.
Yeah, and it's so simple. So our whole thing, with what we teach at Biblical Health is that we know that law is spiritual. And I encourage you guys, look at everything that we consume. Look at every, whether it's things we drink, things we eat. Is this a blessing or a curse to our bodies, right? One of our talks we were going to have, which is going to one day cause a lot of chaos, is the consumption of alcohol, right? And we know that we're seeing a lot of people with not only addictions, because we see it from, we talk about drunkenness. Well, what about the aspect of, there's our son in the back. What about the aspect of high liver enzymes causing diseases from moderate drinking? Are we worried about that, or we say, no, that's provisional, I'm okay? The law leads us to life. It doesn't lead us to death. It doesn't lead us to disease. It doesn't lead us to curses. It leads us to blessings. And that's our challenge. We try to, really focus in on every day. So instead of seeking out gelatin, which we should, obviously nobody wants to eat pig bones, right? That's disgusting, first and foremost. Secondly, we know it's biblically unclean. And not only, I believe that the the dietary instructions teach us how to eat, what we should put in our body. It also teaches us spiritually this aspect, which is underlying throughout all the rest of Scripture, is what we put into our ears, what we put into our eyes, what do we allow, right? There's this whole aspect of being clean, and he's trying to get us there. And, you know, it's funny if you guys don't know, when the New Testament tells us, be holy for I am holy, he's just telling us what Leviticus already told us. Right after he gives the dietary instructions, he says, be holy for I am holy. But later we will soon learn, as the Messiah comes, he teaches us the spiritual nature of his laws. So our encouragement is for you guys to look at your dinner plates, your breakfast, your lunch, and look at it and say, does this lead me to life, or does this lead me to death? Is this still killing me? We have people that call us all the time and say, I've been eating biblically clean. I don't know why I'm still dealing with this disease, that disease, and I'm not repairing, right? Obviously, we know there's prayer. We know there's all these other layers. There's spiritual warfare. There's all sorts of other things people could be dealing with. But if we don't ever address certain things, you know, we mentioned, you know, where do you go to eat? You can go get burgers and fries from McDonald's and go, there's no pork or shellfish in any of this. And we go, is this spiritually clean, or is this just letter by the law clean? And we'll have our answer at that point. So that's our encouragement. We have 5 minutes. I don't know if Liz wants to say anything. We can maybe answer a couple questions. You can yell at us, do whatever you like. But that is our simple message.
Yeah.
Keep it simply spiritual. Except for Paul on the plane, because man, he's too technical for me.
No. Curious, you guys would share your thoughts on distilled water.
Oh, have you really done like a full water talk?
Briefly, distilled water. Distilled water is one of the purest waters you can, from a standpoint of purity. It's the best. There's nothing in it. That's also the problem. There's nothing in it. Water is meant to be life. Scripturally, water is full. It's, you know, he's mentioned as the living water, right? And you give a cold cup of water to your brother, and it's living water. It's full of minerals. It's full of the things that make it alive. So when you have even a distiller, for example, which is great because if you have a distiller at your home, reverse osmosis system, any of those types that remove everything, well, we need to nowadays, right? We got to get rid of chlorine. We got to get rid of the bromine, the lead. You know, we got to get
estrogen.
Yeah, all of that stuff, right?
The pharmaceuticals.
The pharmaceuticals. You know, all vaccinations that end up in the water. All this stuff, right? But it's dead at that point. So what we always typically recommend is if you have a system like that, have something that remineralizes it, alkalizes it a little bit more. And there are systems that do that as well. So, reverse osmosis, distilled water, fantastic for purity, but from the standpoint of, life sustaining, it's not.
If you test the pH of it, so remember, we want the pH of the body to be perfect, and our body's working on this second to make sure that your blood remains at that neutral 7.365. It's pulling minerals from your bones, from everything to stay there. And your tissues also need a specific pH. Your GI tract needs a specific pH. The foods that we consume today, the beverages that we have are constantly fluxing that. And distilled water, when you measure it with on a pH scale, it measures acidic. So we need to do our best on a daily basis to have as much alkalizing foods, minerals, water, drinks, all of that to help keep that balance in check.
Yeah, but there are systems to remineralize
Yeah.
distilled water and reverse osmosis systems. So.
Yeah, even like rocks, certain type of rocks that you can have water sit in.
Yeah.
So what is your take on filters? Like I have a gravity fed filter. I have the Pro here and I have this like an emergency system.
Yeah, Berkey's are awesome.
Yeah.
And There's a newer one that seems better called like.
Yeah.
So does that keep the alkaline?
Yeah. It doesn't remove all the minerals. It removes all of the things that, all the contaminants. Yeah. So that's what you want to look for when you look for systems.
What are your thoughts on the authentic, like fermented sourdough breads?
Fermentation is amazing, as you know. You're getting all of that living bacteria. And I've used einkorn flour. Have you ever used the einkorn flour? It's like the last ancient type of wheat, but it hasn't been hybridized. It hasn't been, man hasn't altered it and completely changed
Yeah, people that
it.
are celiac or gluten sensitive can actually consume einkorn flour with no problems whatsoever.
Yeah. It's just been the hybridization of wheat that has been causing all these issues, along with all of the glyphosate, the Roundup, because wheat gets sprayed twice. So it gets sprayed to eliminate the pest, and then it gets sprayed in its drying process. So many people have issues with wheat. It's probably most likely due to the glyphosate more so than the wheat itself. Bread is life. It's scriptural. And, if you can go back to those ancient grains and use a starter, and make the sourdough from those types, it's phenomenal. Man, is it delicious. I haven't been a good mama keeping up with my cultures, so they're no longer. But it's awesome for you. Anything fermented is amazing for you. Those are those gut microbes. We need them on a daily basis. Everything in our environment is continually working to kill our good bacteria that we have living within us. We have our own ecosystem, each of us, and we always need to be fighting, the good versus the bad. We are more bacteria than we are human cells. Our bacteria outnumber the human DNA 10 to 1. So we always want good gut microbes.
So brands?
Brands of flour.
Good brands?
The Jovial, Jovial, Jovial Foods has an einkorn flour brand.
If you're on a 100% plant-based diet and you have a high metabolism, or if you're an athlete, how do you what's the best way to eat nutrient-dense plant-based foods to maintain your weight?
Going high carb, and I know people are like, high carb. High carb is amazing, and you look at all of these athletes today. Rich Roll, is that the proper? Yeah, he's an ultra marathon. Yeah, crazy, amazing dude, and high carb. It's fuel. It's awesome for the body.
Yeah, actually, even if you take it to the other step, the strongest man in the Olympics a few years back, a U.S. Who broke world records in weightlifting, 100% plants, 100% plants. So it's a myth, right? So, we're not knocking obviously provisional, but yeah, in regards, here's the thing. When you look at plant-based, vegan, these types of approach, people will, obviously we have all the processed foods. We have processed junk vegan food just as much as everybody else does. We're talking about getting back to Genesis 1:29, those live, whole, living foods, those live, living plants.
That have no ingredient, no need for a label.
Yeah.
They are as close to the vine as you can get.
And that's not always possible because we're always going to eat, on the run. We're always going to need something packaged. We're going to come to take on the World Conference every year, right? All of these things. So yeah, there's going to be times, but if our majority of our diet, we're striving to make these things and as much less processed. We run into the trap of lots of processed meals because they're a little faster, right? Just make a pasta dish with this and then that, instead of taking time making, a big salad with, beans and lots of, things that are rich in proteins and all sorts of things that we would do when we're going, we have time. And then we can take time to eat it. Because if we're making something processed, most likely we have no time. So then we scarf it down, and then 15, 20, 30 minutes later, even with enzymes supplementally taken afterwards, you still don't feel the greatest. And you go, Well, that was a tortoise. And then what do? A few hours later, you do it all over again because you're crazy.
Just keep in mind, plants have protein. They have the perfect ratio of protein. Our body does not need high protein. High protein is what's causing and fueling inflammation. It's causing all the itises, arthritis, all of that. It's the high protein that your body cannot break down and cannot digest. Plants have the perfect ratio. And if you're having more plants as your source of protein, you're going to digest it better. You're not going to, in an athlete lifestyle, where you're pushing your body to the max, you're not going to have the high buildup of lactic acid. You're not going to have aches and pains and the poor recovery and all of that. You're not, because you're having more plants. Those are typically more alkalizing foods that's going to balance that acid that's produced with activity.
And the one thing that I will say before we'll get to that is me and Liz got to do some work with the NBA through our company because we work for a enzyme nutrition based company, and it was fantastic being there because we have all sorts of enzymes. We talk about plants and we talk about greens and all these really rich superfoods, and so that's what we were sharing with a lot of the coaches, the trainers and staff, and they all came back and
the cars.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that car. Oh my gosh, how sweet. We made you guys miss the race. The race was at 12:15.
So we started working with all these guys, and the players are starting to do their own research and what works for them. And what you're starting to see is what they are calling not a plant-based diet, but in the NBA, some of the biggest stars are going to what they call plant-dominant diets. And so they go to this plant-dominant diet. These are some of the greatest athletes in the world. They jump the highest. Some of them are extremely strong, and they are like world class on the top. I mean, I could mention.
But guess what? Plant dominant would be sort of like an Israelite diet.
Yeah. So they said, oh, well, we have a little egg. We may have a little bit of this, but every single thing else is plants in their diet. And then some of them, like Kyrie Irving. So, he agrees with a certain topic here. He's like full-blown plant-based, right? And he's an NBA superstar, right? So there's all these realms, but it was so interesting to hear all these coaches and now these trainers are talking and encouraging their players because they're seeing better recovery, less sicknesses on the road, all of these things by going to this plant-dominant diet.
It's been in the Bible all along.
I was just going to ask your opinion on if you can eat too much soy or tofu, because I know a lot of people, have the bad connotation to it that the soy affects your hormones, and there's this thing that people talk about soy boys. I don't know, I'm sure you guys heard about that.
Sure.
So when I try to substitute my meat, I typically use tofu, and then everybody tries to give me crap about eating too much soy.
It's another myth, just like the protein myth. It truly is, because the phytoestrogens in plants are entirely different. Women who have breast cancer do better on soy. It's just complete opposite of what mainstream tells you. Of course, you want to stay away from genetically modified soy, of course. But when you're looking at, sprouted, fermented soy.
Well, let's take a look at this. For men never touch soy. Right? I'm a guy. Donut. That's me trying to have. Because I have this high voice, so maybe I. Yeah.
He said too much soy.
Yeah, right. So you hear this realm. This will probably be funny for the video. So you hear this realm that men can't eat soy, right? And it's going to lower your testosterone. You're going to lower your sperm count. Let's see if you guys how smart this group is. Which group of people consume the most soy?
Asians.
What is the world population mostly made up of?
Asian.
Do they? What people?
Asians.
Asians. And who eats the most soy?
Asians.
Asians. Do they have fertility issues? No, they have fertility problems of making sure to keep down the population. You know, right? Now, obviously, now we're seeing when are Asian people having fertility issues? When they went to a Western diet. When the Western diet came in, if they're dealing with these fertility issues in men. So obviously, we don't have this testosterone issue over there, right? We have this. It's a myth, right? The world's population is mostly Asian, and they are the people who eat the most amount of soy, right? For men, and you go, isn't that an interesting thought?
Right.
So you have this thing where now we're looking at, well, here Yahweh created the soybean, and we're now going to go with what the meat and the dairy industry want to say about
And you
soy.
look at the hormones, the naturally occurring hormones in dairy, that's causing dramatic effects in.
Yeah. So if you want to look at if you want to look at young boys, there's an epidemic growing with hormones in young boys where they're growing breast. This is directly related to high milk consumption, especially in regards of inorganic, all of these realms, because they are off the charts. With
And
these
remember,
hormones.
cheese is just concentrated milk. So it's, maybe if somebody can't do milk, but they can do cheese, that's a huge concentration of hormones.
Like the on the nachos.
Right, pizza. Yeah.
And so here's the thing. When we look at a diet of 80-90% plants, or even 75% diet in plants, we've just reversed it, right? We're 80-90% animal product and very, very minimal plants. That's what we've just done. Our diets have just completely switched. You go to fast food, you're going to get nothing but pretty much animal product and something, and if it's not animal product based, it's probably going to have an animal frying, layering, or something to it that it's just constant. So it's just really reverting back, and I believe, when you look at the perfect plan, what Satan does, he always flips something, right? He gives us a globe, and scriptures say this. He tells us, eat this way. Doctors over here doing this. There's a doctor out there, he's big in the health and natural realm, and his name's Dr. McCullough. Go to his website, everybody's like, he's great, he's all over TV. He has whole articles on how nitrate-free pork is so good for you and healthy for you, right? What? Nitrate-free pork is good for you, bacon, right? And because why? Because it makes it popular. If he can push this agenda, he can do this, and he's got this, right? And when we know, as we all know, can Dr. McCullough's words trump what Yahweh's already told us? No. Yahweh, he created all of this. Christ, the Logos, he created all of these things, and we're going to say, no. Mercola knows better, guys. You know how many people send me a Mercola article or something where they're like, guys, should need this, I will tell you this, I have zero problems in my company doing customer support for thousands of people over the last 10 years. And they all want nutritional advice. What do we need to do to be healthy? I start off with some of the basics, the simple things like eliminate sugar, get rid of genetically modified foods, get rid of this, right? And as we go down this list, then we start talking about remove toxic meat. Ooh, what's toxic meat? Great question, right? Then we start telling them about the bottom feeders. We start explaining pork. We start explaining shellfish. We start explaining lobster. We start explaining these things. And guess what they say? That's amazing. They know that. And they have no problem listening to me, a guy on the phone, tell them all of these things, and then they call back a month later and go, I'm feeling great. I got off of sugar, I got off of genetically modified food, we don't eat bacon anymore, we switched to turkey bacon, right? All of these things, and they're going, wow, my health is improving. How is my health improving? But the problem was, half of those people were believers in this. He said it in his word, and they wouldn't believe it, right? And I think that's on every realm. So we believe that Satan has hijacked God's eating plan, and especially His spiritual eating plan. That's why we're, constantly sick, constantly not. So we can answer some more questions, but everybody else, you can go to lunch.
We're making you late for lunch,
Yeah.
so.
So look at your lunch
Set
plate.
the spiritual on your plate today.
Yeah. Yeah.